Hey there, Eric Chessen, founder of Autism Fitness, leading the movement for movement and bringing you another edition of Autism Fitness Tuesday training where I take a strategy, a concept, a practice that we use in autism fitness programming to strengthen and support our autism and neurodivergent life skill athletes and bring it to you in a way that makes sense so you can take it out and use it. Before I get started, please definitely subscribe. And in addition to sharing this with someone for whom it might make a difference, leave a comment or a question, especially a question, in the comments section below, because that's how I know what you want to know. It helps the channel and it helps out everybody around us, because if you have that question, likely a couple dozen other people have that question as well about programming, about modifications, about progressions, about what exercises make sense, about positive behavior support in a fitness or adapted PE setting. Leave them in the comments. I will read each and every one and sound them out phonetically. No, I'm going to do that also. Anyway, in this edition of Tuesday Training, I'm going to be talking about scalability. Scalability is something, one of those terms that comes up a lot with discussion of the autism population in terms of developing skills. And I'm going to discuss how we use scalability in fitness programming, particularly when we're talking about resistance-based exercise training, in order to implement the exercises or introduce the exercises or coach the exercises safely and effectively. And the effective part is a big deal also, because when we are introducing an exercise, when we are coaching an exercise, think of that exercise as a tool. That tool is supposed to be utilized within a range of specified ways. So we need to understand how the tool is supposed to function in order to get the best result out of it. It's not exactly a one-to-one perfect analogy, but close enough that I think it works. So when we're talking about a squat or an overhead press, for example, we want to understand what is the appropriate level of performance in order for that squat to be safe and effective, meaning that it does the thing that we want it to do. In this case, strengthen the legs, have a little bit of a core stability component as well, but strengthen that posterior chain so that that individual can take that leg strength and use it in a variety of different situations, sitting down, standing up, climbing stairs, descending stairs, all manner of different locomotive activities, and just being stronger in general. So when we understand the function and the purpose of that exercise, we have a greater awareness of how it is supposed to look when it is being performed. Now that gets us into the scalability factor. Of course, we can scale up, but it's really important to understand how we scale back a little bit and how we create structure specifically around exercises that our athletes are having difficulty with it. Now, one of the common misconceptions is that the exercise is just going to, I'm going to do air quotes here, I'm sorry, do its job. So simply because you have the exercise and you're coaching the exercise and the athlete is doing the exercise just means that it's totally fine and everything's okay. That is not the case. So I'll give another mathematical analogy in this case, and I'm by no means a high-level mathematics person. But if someone gave me more likely the equation 4 plus 4, and I kept answering 11, that would be incorrect. And if I kept repeating that over and over and over, 4 plus 4 equals 11, I'm, again, air quotes, doing math, but the answer that I'm coming up with is incorrect. So it would need to be corrected, or I would need some type of intervention or education there in order to produce the right answer. So exercise, even though there's definitely a wider margin of, I wouldn't even say error, but performance, because an individual human body is a little bit different than a mathematical equation. I will say that. But there is still a range of performance, and that range can dip into the ineffective, but we want to keep it in the effective. Now, what happens if our athlete cannot yet perform that squat? We need to modify it, and scaling the exercise back and giving the athlete a simplified or a modified version of that exercise is going to be tremendously helpful in scaffolding their current performance, like making it accessible to them so that they can do the exercise as best as possible. In order to figure that out, I'm petting my dog right now. In order to figure that out, we have to establish a baseline level of performance for that athlete. And that is why we assess. We perform an assessment. In our case, with Autism Fitness, we perform our PAC profile assessment, physical, adaptive, and cognitive. So we understand where the athlete is starting at. Of course, the meet them where they're at adage is huge right now. But when we're talking about that, what does that actually mean? It means understanding where that athlete's squat or overhead press or push-up is right now. So if we have to scaffold down and modify the exercise, we understand what's available to us as a tool or a strategy or a practice. I'll give an example with that, coming back to that squat. If we have an athlete who cannot squat with full range of motion with motor control, which is often the case with a lot of our ASD and neurodivergent athletes, rather than just say, okay, well, we're just going to leave it at this, and at some point they'll pick it up and they'll get better at it, because that's seldom the case, we are going to give them a modified variation, a simplified variation of that squat. So what we typically do in autism fitness programming is we have the athlete squat to a box, or we have them squat to a bench, some type of platform, so that we're reducing the total range of motion until that athlete develops the motor control and strength in order to satisfy that range of motion. And then we can lower the bench or lower the box until the athlete is squatting below parallel, where we are getting to the greatest degree. Degree. This is a degrees of angle joke. It's terrible. I apologize. But what the athlete is doing is lowering. Once they're getting below parallel, we're getting a greater contraction in the glutes and hamstrings, two of the largest muscle groups involved in the squat. So this is a good thing, and it's going to happen over time. So what we're seeing is, as the athlete is developing those performance skills and getting stronger and more stable and more confident, we're able to scale up and increase the challenge level of that squat, but not until the athlete is physically ready for it. So we look at scalability on the macro level in terms of programming, and we can even look at it on the micro level in terms of session to session. Another important factor in why we may want to do this is not just the physical capability, but the adaptive capability as well. Of course, in Autism Fitness, we use that PAC profile, physical, adaptive, and cognitive. And when we're considering adaptive capability, sometimes we start out, and in our general training template, we have 3 or 4 sets of an exercise, and we start out with an athlete, and we note that they are only willing right now to do 2 sets of that exercise. And even though we as coaches, as programmers, really, really want them to get that 3rd set or that 4th set, because we know that's going to increase volume, so it's going to increase strength, so it's going to increase the total value or benefit of that session. Even though all these things are true, right now in meeting that athlete where they are at, we're not going to override their decision to just do those 2 sets right now. Sometimes with an athlete you've been working with for a while, there's definitely some room for negotiation. But in those first couple sessions, I want to make the athlete feel safe and comfortable. I want them to be safe and comfortable. And I also want to give them a sense of autonomy. So if it's 2 sets this week instead of 3 sets, that's fine. That's another situation in which I'm going to modify the program. So originally I had 4 boxes for squats on the dry erase board, and we may take 2 of those sets off because today that athlete has decided that they only want to do those 2 sets. Fine. If we are continuing to develop a trusting, reciprocal coaching and athlete relationship, eventually I'm going to be able to get to those 3 or 4 sets. That athlete has more volume in their program of that particular exercise, and everything is totally cool. Now, even more micro than that, we can have a set of squats or overhead presses or push-ups or whatever exercise where during that set, the athlete is starting to get dysregulated, or we notice that their technique is starting to break down. So originally our plan was to have that athlete do, let's say, 10 repetitions of that overhead press, but we see that their technique is really starting to break down around repetition number 7. So what I tend to do is have the athlete do that one last repetition of that overhead press and say, okay, that's good for now. That set looked great. You can put them down and rest your shoulders. Something like that. Not, and this is what not to do, not saying, oh, your form is breaking down, and telling them all of the things that they're doing incorrectly, because that is a horrible, horrible, horrible coaching practice. Rather, focus on what they are doing correctly and say, okay, that's good. You can put those down and we'll come back to it. This is something that is going to happen to everybody who trains at some point. Fatigue is going to set in. The technique is going to break down. In the case of many of our autism and neurodivergent athletes, they may get dysregulated, or something may be going on internally for them, and they decide they've had it with that set. Now, it's not to say that sometimes, again, we want to encourage our athlete to complete those last 2 or 3 repetitions when we're fairly confident that they are going to be able to do them. But in the case where the athlete has made a decision that they are done, and we all know when that, we typically know when that is, with that set, that's fine. We can come back to it later as well. So the scalability factor is going to be a component of both physical capability in progressing or modifying that exercise, progression being the easiest thing to do in terms of resistance training. Add sets, add repetitions, add resistance or weight to it. And then in terms of modification, it's going to go exercise by exercise. I described a little bit about how we use a box or a platform for that squat. That's highly beneficial for the athlete to learn the motor pattern, to gain that confidence, and to get stronger along the way. So it doesn't have to be an all or nothing type of proposition. And then, of course, on the adaptive side, we have sessions or we have sets of an exercise where the athlete is either getting dysregulated, or they decide for the time being that they've had enough, or they want to do fewer sets in that session. That's all right too. Again, we want to focus on increasing the athlete's confidence and capability. So this is a longer term process. If the athlete only does 2 sets of that overhead press or 2 sets of that band row today, that's all right. And eventually, I know that we can get to that 3 sets or 4 sets, but I first have to build trust and a good rapport with that athlete so that we can continue to develop their program, because it's not just a one-time thing. We want exercise to be a part of their lives for the continuation of their lives. If you're working with adolescents into their teen and adult years, if you're working with teens into their adult and geriatric years, if you're working with adults right now and into their geriatric years, of course, there is no time where fitness, particularly resistance training, is not going to have a beneficial result for those individuals. So I hope that this lesson on scalability has been helpful. Again, we can scale up, but it's really important to understand how to scale down or modify an exercise so the athlete gets the most out of it. We don't want to leave it up to just chance or to osmosis that the exercise is just going to do its job. We're the ones who need to do the job as coach or provider of an exercise program, to understand where and when to modify or scale down an exercise. And of course, that can be contingent on either physical situations where the athlete does not yet have the strength, stamina, and motor planning to perform that exercise, or it could be the adaptive realm as well, where the athlete right now does not feel confident enough, or they're getting dysregulated. Both of these are equally important factors, and let me know what you think. I really would love to know what you think here. Leave it in the comments below. If you have a question or a topic you'd like me to cover in a future edition of Autism Fitness Tuesday training, leave that in the comments below. And of course, if you're ready to go pro and join the movement for movement, you can go to autismfitness.com, learn all about the Autism Fitness Certified Pro program, and you can even register and start your coursework today. I'm Autism Fitness founder Eric Chessen, leading the movement for movement. Thank you very much for watching.